Hello, welcome to the program. Our weekly look at the non-traditional investment management sector. Ahead in the program, we'll look at the latest hedge fund performance stats and learn more about the equity market neutral strategy. But first to what's been one of the biggest issues in the sector very recently. ASIC, not unexpectedly last week, decided to extend the ban on covered short selling of financial stocks. Now, it wasn't just the short sellers, the hedge funds, criticising the move. We even saw some veiled criticism of the ban from ASIC's international counterparts when they presented to the regulator's summer school early last week. So we've now got until May 31st before the ban is lifted. To discuss the likelihood of this actually happening, we're joined, as we are each week, by Australian Fund Monitor's CEO Chris Goslin and the CEO of TechInvest, Rick Steele. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming in. Chris, I'll start with you. What do you think is the likelihood? Or first of all, what's the impact, I suppose, of the ban remaining in place until May 31st? It's just business as usual, I suppose.
Well, it is business as usual because the ban's been on for 6 months, so the managers have got pretty used to it, the market's got pretty used to it. The strange thing is, without delving into the history of it, is elsewhere the ban's been lifted. There was an initial ban in September in New York and London and basically around the world. That's been lifted. That was lifted in November and again in January in England. In Hong Kong, there was never a ban put on, and you mentioned the regulators before, that they've been very open, the offshore regulators, in saying it was only a temporary ban. It hasn't worked, really, because the financial sector's still taking a hammering.
Rick, you would have heard those comments at the ASIC summer school last sort of Monday and Tuesday. What did you make of that? I mean, these guys were invited along to sort of an ASIC event, and they weren't sort of backward in coming forward about the fact that they didn't really think there needed to be a ban.
Well, Kylie, I think it was a good open discussion about the value of short selling bans. I think I like the comment that I think it was Kathleen Casey made, who is an SEC commissioner, and she described the bans as being a concession to fear. In other words, it was clearly a policy that was put in place to deal with fear of what might happen rather than what actually might happen.
OK, well, that's an interesting point. We spoke to Senator Nick Sherry, the Corporate Law Minister, late last week, and we were talking to him. He's basically saying, you know, the government supports the ban. Funnily enough, ASIC wasn't talking to any of the media, so we're still not entirely sure what more was going on there. But he was sort of saying, look, the government supports the ban, and he's saying it's because it's not the time right now to be introducing more risk into the market. You know, we have to tread very softly, we have to support the financial sector, etc. We put to him then, you know, and it was all about this, apparently there's been market manipulation going on, you know, prior to the ban being introduced. So we put to him why, if there has been this manipulation, why are we not seeing the evidence and why are we not seeing the prosecutions coming through from ASIC? If we would just want to listen to a bit of what he had to say now.
Well, in terms of prosecutions, ASIC are required to investigate, gather evidence, and in terms of any prosecutions, they will make the call once they've gathered the evidence. They do not report to me on investigations. That is something that the Minister does not have access to. They report to me on their concerns about market manipulation practices, but they don't report to me on individual cases until such time as any prosecution is to be launched.
So, gentlemen, what's your view? Has there been, I mean, there must have been some form of manipulation for them to, you know, keep wheeling this argument out. You don't think so, Shane?
No, I think it's perfect. I think it's quite interesting that ASIC and the government are talking about rumourage, but in fact, I just don't think that's occurring. In fact, we saw last week comments coming in the print media from political correspondents. So it was the political correspondents in Canberra who were putting stories in the print media about manipulation and the hedge funds sort of waiting on the beaches, waiting to hammer Australian financial stocks. And I think that is absolutely incorrect. I think there was a large amount of spin and innuendo in that, where somewhere within the government or somewhere someone doesn't want short selling allowed, and it's convenient and it's easy to do it. Maintaining the ban doesn't surprise us, but it just doesn't follow any real logic when it's not in place offshore and when there are exemptions to the ban, exemptions via option trading, market makers, stocks that are listed overseas can still be short sold. So you've got dual listed stocks. So it just doesn't follow any great logic.
Rick, what do you make of the whole... Do you think the whole rumourage thing has been blown out of proportion? I mean, what's rumourage and what's... I mean, a lot of what we do is we, hear or deduct or, rumours or conjecture, and then you report them as such, and often, where there is smoke, there's fire, and sometimes they're not. But, I mean, isn't that the way of the market?
Look, it's my view that the short-selling ban is a short-sighted policy. I think when we look back on this period, when we do have the evidence, because there will be some numbers that will be produced, we will discover that short selling actually plays a very small role in the determination of share price movements. I expect, and in fact I've seen an early paper that has been prepared that supports this view, I expect that the short selling that has been conducted to date has had no impact on share price movements. So I think we've had a lot of hearsay, and that hearsay has helped determine policy. What we need now is some evidence, and I think that's the phase we need to move into.
But surely, I mean, there's two key arguments that supporters of short selling go around, and that's price discovery and the other one's liquidity. Now, I understand the liquidity thing, but if you're saying around price discovery of short selling's not having a huge impact on share prices, then...
I think the biggest impact of short selling in the last few months has actually been the implementation of the ban and the impact that's had on confidence rather than the impact of short selling itself. What we want is a market with full integrity, and to have a market with full integrity you must have both buyers and sellers acting freely, and we don't have that situation.
I just want to put something else to you, it's a little bit off the topic, but there was a lot of criticism, I suppose, of the hedge funds, from midway through last year and again last week when this topic came up, that short selling is somehow immoral or unethical. It was something that we put to Kim Ivey, who's the chairman of the AIMA. We might just have a quick listen to what he's got to say about that.
Well, I really can't get into it. I mean, it's impossible to negotiate in terms of managing money on a moral or an ethical point.
Why?
Because it's managing money. I mean,
So is there no room for ethics or morality in managing money?
There is certainly room for ethics, but it's your ethics and your morals versus my ethics and my morals. Everyone is going to have a different set of those both. What we want to try and find out is what is a good investment and what is a bad investment. And many times what's finding out to be a bad investment for relative return managers is the fact that they're trying to find someone to blame. That their stocks that they've picked have gone down faster than the market. Well, obviously they can't, it's difficult for them to blame themselves. Well, we've got to blame someone else.
Is that true? We're just making a scapegoat of the hedge funds?
Look, I'm sure that's the case. I think the thing now is to look forward rather than backward. I think we have the ban on financials in place. We have a date where the regulators will probably pluck up the courage to lift at some point, maybe even before that date. The key now is to make sure that the regulatory platform we have in place does produce proper, clear reporting of short sales, so that we can all come to the right judgment as to whether things have been done in the correct way or not.
All right. I want to move on, but just quickly before we do, just one more thing on short selling, because there has actually been a discussion paper released on Friday. Does it fill you with confidence? Does it make you happy that more discussion papers, more papers are out there, or do we really need to see some action taken, I suppose? What's different about this one?
Well, the paper you referred to is a consultation paper prepared by Treasury in conjunction with Attorney General. It's the next step in the process after the release of the new Act in December of last year. This is about how the Act will actually be implemented, so it's very important to have the right reporting tools in place. So if you're an industry participant, this is one paper you must make a comment on.